To join our colleagues for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Tonight, the future of the First Minister hangs in the balance as he faces a no-confidence vote. In a day of political drama, Humza Yousaf scrapped a power-sharing deal with the Greens, which prompted a furious response.
I believe that going forward, it is in the best interests of the people of Scotland to pursue a different arrangement.
Therefore, the Scottish Green MSPs have decided that we will support a vote of no confidence in the First Minister.
So can Humza Yousaf survive? We'll have all the analysis and we'll hear what you think.
I think it's sad because I think the Greens are a good influence on the SNP.
I vote Green most of the time, but yeah, it hasn't been brilliant.
And in the day's other news, warnings from the World Health Organization over teenage cannabis use and underage vaping in Scotland.
Coming up in the sport, as the countdown continues to Euro 2024, Steve Clarke tells us his biggest achievement as Scotland manager so far.
Hello, I'm Graham Stewart in the Reporting Scotland studio.
And I'm Sally Magnuson, live outside the Scottish Parliament. It started with the First Minister ending the power-sharing agreement with the Green Party, and today's ended with a question mark over whether or not Humza Yousaf can survive. For 3 years, the SNP had a partnership deal with the Green Party. It was known as the Bute House Agreement, named after the First Minister's official residence here in Edinburgh. In the last hour, it's emerged the Scottish Greens will join most of the other parties in this building in backing a motion of no confidence in the First Minister. It's been quite a day in Scottish politics, and our political correspondent Lindsay Bewes joins me now. Lindsay, your thoughts?
Yeah, it has indeed been an extraordinary day, hasn't it, Sally? Humza Yousaf's decision to end that power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens, I think, has profoundly damaged the relationship between the two independent supporting parties here at Holyrood. And indeed, Humza Yousaf himself is now under severe pressure after barely a year in office, questions over his leadership, over his judgment, and now a vote of no confidence from MSPs. A vote there is much uncertainty over whether he can survive, considering he now leads that minority government here at Holyrood. We began today very early, it has to be said, with plenty of speculation over the future of the Bute House Agreement, and we're ending it with a lot of speculation over whether Humza Yousaf will still be First Minister come next week.
Let's see your report now.
Is the agreement with the SNP over?
An early exit from Bute House and an early exit from government for the Greens co-leaders. Their power-sharing deal brought to an abrupt end after a meeting with the First Minister this morning.
2, 1.
As recently as Tuesday, Humza Yousaf insisted he didn't want to cut ties.
I value the partnership and cooperation agreement with the Greens, and I can see the benefit, and I think people of Scotland can feel the benefit.
Less than 48 hours later, a major U-turn, the First Minister announcing his decision to dump his junior partners.
The Bute House Agreement was intended to provide stability to the Scottish Government, and it has made possible a number of achievements, but it has served its purpose. I believe that going forward, it is in the best interests of the people of Scotland to pursue a different arrangement.
The Greens had been due to offer their members a vote on whether to continue supporting the SNP in power. Relations had strained over watered-down climate targets and the response to a review of gender identity services for children.
The First Minister has decided, I'm sorry to say, to capitulate to the most reactionary, backward-looking forces within the SNP, and it's the opposite of what's in Scotland's best interests.
I think the future generations of Scotland have been betrayed. The progressive policies that Greens were working towards were about creating a long-standing vision for a greener and fairer Scotland, and now anything we see brought to the Chamber will be watered down, delayed, underfunded.
There had been some concerns in the SNP over Green influence in government, including too great a focus on trans rights.
When in life squatters are eventually removed, a cleaning up operation is generally required. So the serious point is that I think Humza has got a real opportunity to change.
I think the First Minister might be a bit tetchy today. I wonder why.
But Humza Yousaf's most pressing challenge is survival. The Tory leader announcing his plans to lodge a vote of no confidence in the First Minister.
He has abandoned the platform he stood on. He claims it's now a new beginning. But really, it's the beginning of the end. Isn't Humza Yousaf a lame duck First Minister?
Labour wants an election.
The people of Scotland can see that the SNP have lost their way. They're weak, divided, incompetent and putting party before country.
After a bruising day, the Greens return to strike a final blow, no longer believing their goals will be delivered by the First Minister.
The sudden ending of the Butte House Agreement today calls the delivery of those objectives into question. And therefore, the Scottish Green MSPs have decided that we will support a vote of no confidence in the First Minister.
The Greens' anger over this breakup has been plain to see, and now they've made Humza Yousaf's survival as First Minister very difficult. He began the day by effectively sacking 2 ministers. Now his own future in government is in doubt.
Lindsay, now that we know that the Greens are going to vote against Humza Yousaf, can he survive?
It's really difficult for him. He basically has to rely on the support of someone like Ash Regan to get the numbers, and even then it's on a knife edge for him. So, you know, an SNP rebel, for example, would end it for him. So I think it's really difficult to see how he can survive unless he offers some sort of concessions to Ash Regan that in that event she agrees to abstain or, you know, vote to support him.
So we can expect some horse trading, in fact. If Humza Yousaf does survive that vote, though, how politically damaging would it be for him still?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult for him to continue even after that, because there are so many questions now about his judgment and his leadership. The word weak was used on multiple occasions today. That power sharing deal we know had been under strain for quite some time, brought to a head by, as we mentioned in the report there, the climate change targets and the decision over puberty blockers. But there had been other problems as well that had been highlighted by some parts of the SNP around a focus on, for example, gender reforms, that they felt the Greens were having far too much influence over Humza Yousaf. And he's now ended up doing what Kate Forbes had pitched to do really in her own leadership bid. So he's coming from a very weak position now, and he's also, if he does survive, going to have to try and lead a minority government going forward. That will be very difficult to get his legislative agenda through Parliament, very difficult for him to reassert his legislative agenda.
Lizzie Buse, thank you very much indeed for that, and we'll have more on the confidence motion in a little while. But as we've heard in recent weeks, the power sharing deal between the SNP and the Greens had been under greater strain than ever before. There was the decision to pause the prescription of puberty blockers on the NHS here. There was also the ditching of what were once heralded as world-leading climate change targets. But these developments provoked outcry among some Green Party members. But these weren't the only issues facing the Butte House Agreement, as our political correspondent David Henderson explains.
The Butte House Agreement lasted less than 1,000 days, but it brought Green ministers into government for the first time anywhere in the UK, and with them came a raft of Green policies. So what do voters think now they're gone?
I think it's sad because I think the Greens are a good influence on the SNP, but I guess we've had a minority government before, so I guess it's going to happen again.
Yeah, like I vote Green most of the time, but yeah, it hasn't been brilliant recently.
There's been so much stress on the gender stuff, which is very, very important, but I think it's created more problems, to be perfectly honest. They've got a bad press through it.
I think it's a shame that it's ended, because I think it was brilliant that there's two parties working together. I think the biggest shame is that the Green agenda has gone.
For months, this power-sharing deal was under pressure, with key plans like the deposit return scheme stalled, then ditched. The final straw, a row over the pause on the prescription of puberty blockers for under-18s, and the scrapping of climate targets. So now the deal's collapsed, there's pressure on Humza Yousaf to change direction.
Well, the First Minister has made this decision, and I think it's a great opportunity for the Scottish Government and the party to focus on our priorities and to focus on delivery. Thanks.
But the balance of power at Holyrood means it's not that simple.
Humza Yousaf is running a minority government, so he'll need the support of more than just his own MSPs to survive a vote of no confidence. So he has a choice to make. Does he try to keep the Greens on board, or does he reach out to others?
With the Greens backing that no confidence vote, the Alapa Party's sole MSP is crucial.
Well, luckily for Humza, he's put the decision-making power of the Parliament effectively into the hands of one of the brightest and best and most responsible MSPs in the Parliament, which is Ash Regan of the Alapa Party. She's one of the few adults in the room. So he has the opportunity to try and secure her vote. But he'll have to work at it. You can't assume it, but you have to work at it, and he's going to have to respond to the letter that Ash will be writing him to say what her priorities are.
And what now for the Greens? They're out of office, but not, they think, out of power.
Wherever we are in the Parliament, we will fight for our principles, and wherever we are, we can win. One of our flagship policies, free bus travel for under 22s, was a victory that we won from the Scottish Government before we entered government for the first time. So we can win in government, we can win out of government.
So the scene's set for days of horse trading, then a knife-edge vote to decide what follows this power-sharing deal. David Henderson, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
Our political correspondent Kirsten Campbell is here. Kirsten, as political breakups go, this has been quite a bad one.
Yeah, well, Holyrood was a little bit like a high school playground today, with everyone speculating about the breakdown in this relationship and whether the First Minister had finished with the Greens before they could dump him. And we even had Taylor Swift lyrics quoted in the Parliament chamber. But the First Minister's obviously decided he wants to make a go of it as a minority government. You can do that if you work issue by issue, build consensus out as it goes. That's particularly challenging in an election year, and of course he has to survive first.
Now, this no confidence motion that we can expect in this building sometime next week, what is it exactly and what can we expect from it?
Well, if 25 MSPs sign it, then it will be debated, and we'd expect that to happen maybe Wednesday or Thursday of next week. A vote of no confidence in a government is legally binding, but a vote of no confidence in a minister, there's a little bit of discretion there. Although realistically, I think it would be politically untenable to stay on if you were voted out. The parliamentary arithmetic is tight. Even if Alba's Ash Regan can be persuaded to back the First Minister, that vote would be tied. In that event, it would come down to the casting vote of the presiding officer. Tradition dictates that the presiding officer would vote with the status quo. So in that scenario, he would survive, only just and with very damaged political credibility. If he were to lose and have to resign, then that still doesn't necessarily mean that we have an election. In that circumstance, Parliament has 28 days to find a new First Minister that does have the support of Parliament. And only if that doesn't happen would the electorate be asked to go to the polls. So in the words of Patrick Harvey, there's a lot of drama still to come.
But we're nearer to that election than we were at 8 o'clock this morning.
We are indeed.
Thanks very much, Kirsten. Now, one of the big themes running through the ending of the SNP and Greens power sharing deal has been climate change. We're joined now by our environment correspondent, Kevin Keane. Kevin, how have environmental groups reacted to this?
Well, Sally, I'd say there's a theme to what they're saying today, which is they essentially don't want climate policy to go the same way as the Butte House Agreement. WWF Scotland, for example, they're saying that the First Minister now needs to urgently take the steps necessary to address the climate and nature emergencies. Friends of the Earth Scotland, they're saying that he needs to strengthen what they describe as the desperately weak policy package that was offered last week. And Oxfam Scotland say that it's time for leaders now to shift their gaze from party politics and onto the planet. But not everybody is commiserating the end of this agreement. NFU Scotland, which represents farmers, of course, have long complained about it, and they say they've had significant concerns that many aspects were not in the best interests of rural communities. But an interesting thing to note this evening is that Humza Yousaf will now have to seek new support for abolishing those climate change targets, the key 2030 target to reduce emissions by 75%. He can no longer rely on the Scottish Greens for that. It was Scottish Labour, supported by the Lib Dems, who proposed it in the first place, so it's unlikely that they will support it. Indeed, the Liberal Democrats have confirmed that's the case, so it's likely it will rely on an alliance with the Scottish Conservatives, and Humza Yousaf today described them as a party of climate change deniers, so it could well be an unholy alliance.
Now, both parties have highlighted achievements over the past 3 years on climate measures. What do you see as the environmental legacy of this power sharing agreement?
Yeah, I think that legacy, Sally, is going to be mixed, and we've heard a couple of policy areas being mentioned over the last few minutes, one of which, of course, is free bus travel for under 22s. That's one that they would champion as a success. But alongside that, you've got things like the Wildlife and Muirburn Bill that was passed recently, and that's to strengthen the law around wildlife crime, in particular the persecution of birds of prey. But then conversely to that, you've got things like highly protected marine areas that had to be scrapped, and so too the deposit return scheme, which has also been confirmed today will be delayed by another 2 years because of a decision by the UK government to 2027.
Kevin Keane, thank you very much. I'll be back with our political correspondent Andrew Kerr at the end of the programme to bring you the very latest on today's extremely significant political developments. But let's get the day's other news now from Graham in the Reporting Scotland studio.
Sally, thank you. A big international survey has been looking into habits like smoking, vaping and cannabis use among young people in Scotland and many other countries around the world. So what's it found? Well, Scotland had the highest rate of 15-year-old boys who'd ever used cannabis at just under a quarter. Meanwhile, in most countries, vaping has overtaken smoking. The survey found 40% of 15-year-old girls here had tried vaping. The report from the World Health Organization is one of the biggest studies of its kind. Katie Hunter has more.
They're all habits that can harm our health, even more so for children. Now a big international survey into vaping, drinking, smoking and cannabis use among 11 to 15-year-olds has been published.
It really allows us to look at how young people in Scotland are doing relative to their counterparts in other countries across the world.
And how are young people in Scotland doing?
Yeah, so I think there are some concerning findings in the report. It has to be looked at in the context of huge decreases in substance use in recent years, both drinking and smoking. But what we're seeing in the latest figures are an increase in alcohol use amongst our 13-year-old girls in particular, and also relatively high levels of vaping compared with other countries.
When it comes to vaping, young adults we spoke to weren't surprised that it's so common among young teenagers.
I think when I was at school it wasn't as much, but hearing from younger students in schools it's definitely a lot more prevalent these days.
Vaping generally when we were younger wasn't as much of a problem, but I suppose as we get into our last year of school, that's something you notice a little bit more. So I imagine it's probably a problem now.
My little brother, as he said, everybody, the bathrooms are like clouds of smoke almost now. It's just very, very common.
The survey found Scotland had the highest percentage of 15-year-old boys having tried cannabis at some point in their lifetime. Hannah Armstrong helps young people who use drugs, including one teenager who had a problem with cannabis.
The reason he was using cannabis to start was because he thought that it kind of looked cool and that it was fun and that his friends were all doing it. And in the end, it was kind of more to manage anxiety. This is a common misconception with young people that cannabis will help with their anxiety. Unfortunately, sometimes it can do the opposite. It can be really negative on their mental health.
The Scottish Government says it's investing in projects to support young people affected by substance misuse. The challenge for public health experts and politicians, both here and around the world, is how to put children off these harmful habits. Katie Hunter, Reporting Scotland.
Some of the day's other stories now. And 3 people have been rescued after a fishing boat collided with a tanker in the Firth of Clyde. Lifeboats from the Isle of Arran and Troon were sent with 2 Coast Guard helicopters after the alarm was raised around 3:15 this afternoon. The fishing boat sunk at the scene. The Marine Accident Investigation Branch and Police Scotland have been informed. The countdown is on for the first rocket launch from the Saxaford Spaceport in Shetland. It's just received the final licence from the Civil Aviation Authority to carry out orbital launches. Saxaford is the first licensed vertical spaceport in Scotland, and it could soon carry up to 30 launches a year. Lewis is here with the sport. We're looking ahead to the Euros not long now.
Not long now, just a 50 days, not that we're counting or anything like that. Thanks very much, Graham. Yes, hello there. Well, Scotland head coach Steve Clarke says that one of his biggest achievements as manager so far has been re-establishing a connection between the fans and his team. It's just 50 days until the national side kick off Euro 2024, as I said, against the host Germany at the Allianz Arena in Munich. And the Scotland boss thinks it'll be a bigger occasion than Euro 2020.
It just feels more like it's probably wrong to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It feels more like a proper tournament because you're going there, you're going to one country. There's going to be full houses. Obviously, we're involved in the glamour game, if you like, the first game, the opening game of the tournament. It's going to be a big occasion. For me, one of the best achievements of this group of players, or myself in this group of players, is the fact that we've managed to re-engage with the Scottish public, and they come to Hampden now and they're there in their thousands and they're supporting the team. They know they can turn up now and expect their team to be competitive. We might not win every game, but they expect the team to be competitive in every game now, and that's a good place to be.
Have you at any point written down 23 names on a piece of paper, just for the crack?
The piece of paper I've got has got about 60 names on it. Because you have to look at the whole expanded, who you've picked before, who you haven't picked, who you might pick, some younger ones in there who might be the future, who hopefully will be the future. And then you've got your regulars, the ones that you're hoping are fit and well and you can take with you. But I've never actually sat down and said that's the 23 that will be going to Germany, as long as everything is good, everyone's fit and healthy.
And you can hear the full interview with Tom English on this Sporting Life podcast on BBC Sounds. Now to the Scottish Cup final between Celtic and Rangers on the 25th of May, and the Scottish FA has confirmed the match will kick off at 3 o'clock. It means that the fixture will clash with the Manchester Derby in the FA Cup final, with the BBC providing live TV coverage of both matches. Last season, the final was moved to 5:30 to avoid an overlap with the English showpiece event, but this season it will stick to the traditional time. Now, we told you earlier this week about Buckie Thistle's Highland League title win. Well, tonight there's bad news for the club as they've been denied the chance to compete for promotion to the SPFL. Buckie were due to play Lowland League winners East Kilbride in the Pyramid playoff this weekend, but the Scottish FA says that will no longer happen because they haven't met club licensing requirements in time, despite several reminders. East Kilbride will now go on to the playoff final. To rugby now, and Scotland head coach Brian Eason has named his team to face Ireland in the final round of the Women's Six Nations. Just the one change to the forwards, Emma Wassell returns after missing the past 2 matches, with Eva Donaldson dropping to the bench. And 2 changes to the backs, Meryl Smith replacing the suspended Chloe Rowley, and Corinne Grant takes over from Rona Lloyd, who is on Great Britain's Sevens duty. A win would ensure Scotland will hold on to 3rd place in the table and secure a place in WXV1, the top tier of world rugby, and seal their place at the World Cup too.
Success doesn't happen overnight, and it's hard work. And you know, we always review. We will review on Monday as soon as Six Nations is finished, because we'll be looking ahead as to what comes, whether it be WXV1 or 2. That doesn't, you know, for us it will be starting to look forward, and that's how you make progress. Is you don't sit still. You know, coaches never sit still. I'm always busy. I'm always thinking, and I never stop in terms of, you know, where my head is going and where you can take this team. And there's a lot of potential with this team.
And that's your sport for tonight, Graham.
WXV1, bit of a mouthful, but yeah. Lewis, thank you for that. Before we head back to Sally at Holyrood, let's get the weather forecast now from Christopher Blanchett.
Good evening. Well, it started off pretty bright and sunny across many parts of the country earlier today. Then the cloud tended to build with a few showers, although we do end the day with a few bright spells and some sunshine, as we've seen in Edinburgh. As we head into this evening and overnight, the showers tending to fade away. It will be a cold night, colder than last night. Temperatures here in towns and cities, in the countryside down to around -3. The odd icy patch around as well. To tomorrow, and we start off with a lot of bright and sunny weather, but like today, the cloud will tend to bubble up through the course of Friday. And once again, there will be a number of showers coming in from the north, almost anywhere really, but probably through parts of west central Scotland and the southwest, the longest gaps between the showers. Warmest in the west, 11-12 degrees, once again cooler towards the east and northeast. The wind's not as strong as we've seen of late, but still a bit of a breeze and feeling cool in that breeze at times. In any of those heavier showers, perhaps just the odd bit of hail, some decent spells of sunshine across Orkney and Shetland as we head through the afternoon. And then as we look towards Friday evening and Friday night, once again, those showers fading away, so another cold night on the cards. This is overnight Friday to Saturday, a fairly widespread frost in the countryside through central, eastern and southern parts of the country. That takes us to the weekend, and you can see we do have areas of low pressure nearby, but actually a lot of dry weather to come. We do have the chance of some wet weather pushing in towards the east coast on Sunday. More on that in a second. Here's Saturday. Once again, some decent dry and bright weather. The cloud tending to build. Most of the showers likely through Argyll, in towards the Highlands and Islands, 1 or 2 elsewhere. Temperatures around about 10 to 12 Celsius. The east coast not feeling quite as cool as it has done. And then on Sunday, there's the rain. Out at sea at the moment, it could come a little further west. It's one to watch. Elsewhere, some areas of cloud, 1 or 2 showers at times. And then next week, well, it should be just a little bit warmer. Temperatures at times into the mid-teens. Some sunshine, but also some showers to contend with at times too. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks very much, Chris. Welcome back to us here at a rather chilly Holyrood, where several events have unfolded today which have very serious implications for who's in charge in the Scottish Parliament. Behind me here, I'm joined now by our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr. Quite a day, Andrew. Talk us through where we go from here.
Sally, it really is. This is a pivotal moment in Scottish politics. Humza Yousaf had been regarded as the continuity candidate after Sturgeon, but now it's not continuity, it's chaos. He started the day wanting to be a commanding political leader, and he ends the day fighting for his political life. It really is quite incredible. He has seen his power and authority drain away. So the power broker is now Ash Regan of the Alapa Party, a woman previously dismissed by the SNP. So anxious conversations will be taking place this weekend with her. Now for the Greens, they are hurt, angry, disappointed that they were chucked out in this unceremonious way. Patrick Harvey told me he'd have more time to spend cycling now after this. But for Humza Yousaf, this is a moment of real political jeopardy for him. Really quite a surprising moment.
A lot of steps, as we were hearing from Kirsten Campbell earlier, before we might get to an election here, but we are closer to it now tonight.
We really are, and you're right, there are these steps to get there first, but who would have believed in the early hours of this morning that we're closer to an election in Edinburgh than a UK general election?
Thanks very much, Andrew. That's it from the Scottish Parliament. From all of us here, good night.
Final day bound.